Hey, this is Kobe. This upcoming video I made this year with the women in my group that I coach for fitness and nutrition. And I wanted to share it on here because it is so impactful in terms of how we can use nutrition in our metabolic flexibility. Now, if you've never heard that term before, this video will tell you what it's all about, why you want it, and how you can obtain it for decreased perimenopause symptoms and just a general feeling of well-being through a simple eating method. So stay tuned. It's coming up next, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome to your volume eating workshop. My name's Kobe, and I help women over 40 regulate their hormones to help with metabolism and menopause symptoms. And I do this all through fun fitness and nutrition because these are the foundations. And when we work from the foundations, we can figure out all the ways our bodies can balance itself through what we eat and how we move. So today we're going to talk about volume eating, and we'll go through what volume eating is, how we can use it to impact and affect our metabolism. And then at the end, I would love to tell you a little bit about my membership that can help you dive deeper into your fitness and nutrition over 40. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and we can go over what exactly is volume eating and why we would want to do it. So we're going to look at volume eating for metabolic flexibility, and we're going to go over what metabolic flexibility actually is and how it looks in us who are over 40. What we'll cover is metabolic flexibility. That's how we're going to start off, and then why we would want metabolic flexibility. We will then talk about what is the volume eating method and how we can use the volume method for optimal metabolism. So metabolic flexibility essentially means how our body can shift from store mode into burn mode. So when we are metabolically flexible, our body shifts easily between using carbohydrates and using fat. So carbohydrates and fat are our body's primary sources of energy. The first one our body's going to always use is carbohydrates. If we have carbohydrates in our system, meaning that we've eaten them, then our body will use carbohydrates first. After the carbohydrates have been used, these are used within the first 2 hours after we eat, then insulin is not going to be present anymore. So carbohydrates turn into blood sugar in our body, and then insulin is the transporter of this blood sugar into our cells that use that blood sugar for energy. When the blood sugar is reduces, the carbohydrates are no longer there. Insulin doesn't need to be there anymore, and then our body will use fat as energy. So our body can use either dietary fat we've eaten, or fat that's stored in the body. So when it uses dietary fat that's not there anymore, it will then use fat that's stored on the body as energy. That's when our body is working optimally in the most flexible state. What happens is in our regular Western way of eating, our body becomes very inflexible metabolically. So that means that it struggles between shifting between these systems. So it requires more carbohydrates for energy, resulting in energy spikes and energy drops. And I'll go through a little later on kind of a visual of what that looks like. And this can create more hunger cravings and just more sugar cravings, more carbohydrate cravings. So if you find that you get hangry, then your body is likely in a metabolically inflexible state. So kind of what this looks like is that a metabolically flexible person can eat a meal that has a carbohydrate in it, uses the energy from that carbohydrate, and then switches into fat burning mode when that carbohydrate has been used. The body will store the excess glucose from that carbohydrate into the liver and the muscles, and then our body will then, a flexible body will then turn to the fat burning for its secondary source when the insulin is no longer there. So this is kind of inflexible versus flexible body. So this is the things that you'll notice. If your body is inflexibly metabolic, then it solely uses carbohydrates for energy and can't effectively tap into stored fat for energy. This is when we'll experience sugar cravings, energy spikes and energy crashes, feelings of hangriness, and then a need for more frequent food. So if you feel like you need to eat every couple of hours, this is likely because your body hasn't adapted to being metabolically flexible and using fat for energy instead. When a body is flexible, it can use dietary fat as well. So it'll use the carbohydrates like I mentioned first, and then it'll use the dietary fat, so the fat that we've eaten for energy. And then after those stores are gone, after we've used those, it can tap into the stored fat for fuel instead. This will result in feeling more energetic throughout the day, more sustained energy, so there isn't those spikes and crashes, and then will be hormonally balanced with little or no sugar cravings. A body who's flexible can easily go between 4 to 6 hours between meals. And to be noted that this process takes some time depending on the person. I have gone through this process of being inflexible to being flexible, and it does take some time, especially if, like me, you're very reliant on carbohydrates and sugar for energy. I was very much a person who ate every 2 hours, and my body just used what I had eaten, so just the carbohydrates, for energy, and I had a lot of cravings throughout the day. Every 2 hours I was starving, and I needed to eat every 2 hours. Once I went through this process, and it does take some time and it can feel uncomfortable, like you can have headaches, especially if you are heavily reliant on sugar and carbohydrates for energy. You can go through times of having headaches or maybe feeling a little bit nauseous or queasy or lightheaded. And this process does take a little while to go through as you become sugar dependent or carbohydrate dependent into a fat adapted body. So this process of discomfort potentially can be alleviated rather than, snapping right into being metabolically flexible, as we take a little bit more time to gradually bring our body there, so it doesn't feel so uncomfortable in this process. For me, it took probably a solid 12 to 18 months to fully transition into this metabolically flexible state, because I did it gradually and I gave myself some grace along the way. And it was less uncomfortable, but it did take a little bit more time. So just to give you a little bit of a visual on what happens here when we eat. So you'll notice that there's two lines here. There's the red line and then there's the green line. So the red line is what happens when our body is sugar dependent, is carbohydrate dependent, meaning it is inflexible. So what happens, we eat something with a carbohydrate. So when I say carbohydrates, I mean more the refined carbohydrates, the processed carbohydrates, baked goods, things that don't have very much fiber in them. So we eat something like that, our blood sugar goes up, we feel really great, we feel energized, our body uses that. However, within 2 hours, because it was refined and processed, then our blood sugar drops and we feel that craving, we feel that hangriness, we feel unfocused in our brain, we feel lethargic. So we then eat again, our blood sugar spikes, and then it crashes once again. So as you can see, that red line is very drastic. It goes up high and it goes down low. And these are those really intense feelings of high energy, big low crash. The green line, on the other hand, is more optimal. This is more where we want to be when we are metabolically flexible. So we'll eat something here at the bottom of the green line, our blood sugar will rise as it naturally does, and then it will go down, we'll eat again, and it will go up, but it won't have that drastic high and low. And this is when we're eating things higher in fiber, things that haven't been processed, so our body has the opportunity to process them, therefore we get more sustained energy. So why do we want to be metabolically flexible other than those high energy and low crashes? What benefits do we have to be metabolically flexible? Well, we get improved energy levels, as we talked about, for more consistency and more endurance. So that means that rather than those big spikes and those low crashes, we're going to have more sustained energy. We can go for longer between meals. We feel more sustained, more consistent, and we can have more endurance with our energy, more focus. One of the other benefits is more weight management. So because we have the ability to burn stored fat, we'll also reduce the amount of our fat that we're storing on the body. So essentially when our body is storing fat, it's storing energy. So as we eat, our blood sugar rises, our insulin comes in, that's our digestive hormone. It comes in, or our storage hormone, I should say. Insulin comes in, transfers the glucose, so the energy that's in our bloodstream, transfers it to our cells for use or storage. So when our body is using the energy that we're consuming, we're able to move, to have that energy that we need for actual movement, but also all of our regular bodily functions. And then it's going to store what we don't use. So depending on how much we're eating, it's going to store more, and it's going to store that as fat. So if we are eating as much as we are using, then it won't feel the need to store extra. Being metabolically flexible also helps with our hormone balance. So as we age, as we get to be over 40, we'll notice a change in the way our hormones are fluctuating. So up until perimenopause, up until 40s, somewhere within our 40s, our hormone levels are at a consistent rate. So we'll notice that cyclical use of our hormones, that cyclical rate with each of our 28 to 35 day cycle, whatever your actual cycle happens to be. But when we get to be 40, into our 40s, this cycle changes. Our estrogen levels change, our progesterone levels drop, and that is the trend that's called the menopause transition. So as we transition into menopause, these hormone levels, estrogen and progesterone, shift, which also creates a shift in our cortisol, which is our stress hormone, which then impacts our insulin balance. So cortisol directly affects our insulin. And so when we can eat in a way that creates metabolic flexibility, it's going to help our insulin, it's going to help our cortisol, and therefore it's going to help our estrogen and progesterone as well. So it sounds very complicated when we start talking about all these different hormones. It sounds like a complicated topic, and it is. But the cool thing is that we don't need to worry about all those systems and how they're working in the body. We just need to worry about what we're eating and how we're moving. So to break it right down, we just need to worry about what goes into our mouth and then how we're moving our body. And that's going to create a foundation, and it's going to help to regulate all of those hormones. Another reason that we want to become metabolically flexible is for a reduced risk of diabetes, heart disease, and muscle loss, because we're optimally using our carbohydrates and our fats for our energy. So here is what the topic we're talking about today is: the volume eating method. One of the best ways that we can become metabolically flexible is through the volume eating method. And this method emphasizes larger quantities of low calorie, nutrient dense, fiber rich foods. Essentially, vegetables is what is in this category. So there are other nutrient dense, fiber rich foods, absolutely. And we want to include those as well. But veggies is where it's at in terms of getting the most density, the most volume of food to help us feel satisfied and also promote healthy weight management, liver detox, gut motility, that means pooping, and metabolic flexibility. So when we can add all sorts of colors of the rainbow of these vegetables into our every single meal, we're going to get the most bang for our buck. Basically, we're going to get lots of minerals and vitamins. That's going to give us fiber to help with moving the food through our system. That's also going to help keep us satiated and satisfied. So as we can refer back to that spike and crash in the red line versus the green height, the green smaller high and low, that's why we're bringing in these nutrient dense fiber rich food, is it's going to create that sustained energy, which will help us create that metabolic flexibility. And then as a side note or a positive effect and symptom of eating in this way, we're going to help to detox our liver. We're going to help create consistent pooping schedules, and we're also going to then create healthy weight management. So here's just a little idea of how we can create, one of the ways we can create the volume method in each one of these meals. So the volume method essentially means that we're bringing in loads of fiber into what we're eating and every single meal. So a little breakdown of what fiber actually does for you. It helps to fill you up. So when we are filling up with fiber, we are signaling the brain, we're signaling the brain through the hormone leptin that we are full. So we won't feel the need to overeat because we're eating all sorts of fiber-rich, low-calorie, high-nutrient foods. And something to note is that fiber is not digested, which is the reason why it helps to move everything through our body. And therefore it has no calories and it has no energy. So the actual fiber within these carbohydrates, because vegetables are also considered carbohydrates, so just low calorie carbohydrates, it's the fiber in the vegetables is going to help to fill you up, but it's not digested, and therefore it's going to help move everything through your system. So it doesn't have any impact on your blood sugar levels. It will be the other forms of carbohydrates, the other pieces of these carbohydrates that you will be eating to give you the energy, but the fiber is going to be what brings the bulk to your food. Because it's not digested, it needs to be included at every meal so that it's a continual flow of motility through your digestive system. Adding more vegetables means adding more fiber, which means adding more vitamins and minerals, and that creates an anti-inflammatory body. And you very likely have heard a lot about chronic inflammation and how chronic inflammation in your body creates all sorts of different prolonged health conditions, concerns with heart disease and diabetes, all sorts of different things that we can, through adding more vegetables into our diet, help the liver to process out all of the toxins that are creating this inflammation in the body. So because our fiber is not digested, we need to include it at every meal. We want a daily fiber goal to be 28 to 40 grams, which then translates into 7 to 10 grams per meal, because we want to make sure that we include it at every meal. So if we just look over here to the left, the difference between the top and the bottom picture, it's the same meal. It's just that we've added more volume, more fiber, more vegetables, so that it's going to create more of a full, more satiety. So we're feeling more full, but we're also then creating more vitamin and mineral impact on the body too, to help us with that anti-inflammatory, which then helps to create more of a hormone balance in our body as well. So on the left, we've got spaghetti with some regular tomato sauce. And on the bottom, the spaghetti has been, you could either replace the spaghetti noodles with some sort of zucchini noodles or squash noodles or something like that, or you can go for a half and half. So this is what I meant by a slower transition, giving yourself grace along the way. If you're the kind of person that you know can make a full circle cold turkey change and be able to sustain that, go for it. I know most of us, though, slow and steady is what actually creates the long-term sustainable change that we know will keep for the long term. So in the bottom, you could go for half pasta and then half zucchini noodles or squash noodles or sweet potato noodles, something else that's going to create that more fiber rich and vegetable filled meal. And then in the middle, we've got a salad with greens, chickpeas, chicken, and avocado on the top. And that is a complete meal right there for sure, but it probably won't fill you up or give you as many vitamins as the one right below it. So it's still got the chicken, the chickpeas, the greens, and the avocado. And we've also got some tomatoes, some peppers, and some onions to add more bulk to the meal to fill you up, as well as give you all of the more colors of the rainbow to give you those vitamins and minerals that are going to help with all sorts of systems in the body. And then on the right hand side, we've got scrambled eggs on the top. So your egg scramble, I like to put egg whites and egg together to create a little bit more protein, because protein is going to also help everything move along and help to create that sustained energy, that green line that we looked at earlier. And then you could add more bulk to that, because I'm not sure about you, but one egg and a little bit of egg whites isn't going to create that sustained energy or fill me up for as long as a veggie egg scramble would be. So you've taken the eggs from the top, and then you've added some zucchini, some tomatoes, some peppers, some onions, whatever sort of flavors you want for your vegetables, to add in all sorts of different colors, and then more bulk to your meal. I wanted to go through some quick swaps for, it's really kind of nice to have a visual and have an idea of, well, instead of this, what can I add or swap out? So when we're looking at these swaps, they can be swapped over completely, or you can, like we were talking about with the noodles earlier, you can add sort of a half and half in there instead, to give yourself grace along the way as you're switching from metabolically inflexible to flexible. So carbohydrates this is a whole other topic, but carbohydrates encompass a lot of different foods. So we've got the complex carbohydrates, which are the ones that have fiber and calories. Calories means energy. So it's going to give us fiber, but it's also going to give us the energy. And then we've got the vegetables category that has very few calories, so very little energy, and also a lot of fiber. So as we go through these swaps, you're going to see some that are the complex carbohydrates, some of the energy providing carbohydrates, and then some of the veggie swaps out. So on the left, we're going to look at what we can swap out for on the right. So let's start at the top on the left-hand side there. So we've got the pasta dish, which we looked at before. And some swap options are spiralized zucchini, butternut squash, or sweet potato noodles, or shirataki noodles, which is a Japanese konjac yam. You can make those into noodles as well. Instead of white rice that's already been processed. So essentially white rice has a lot of that fiber taken out of it already because it's been processed. And then instead of eating that white rice, you can go for brown rice, which has that fiber piece already still on it. Quinoa, which has protein and fiber, cauliflower rice, which is a vegetable, so of course it's got the fiber, or any whole grain instead. Then what whole grain essentially means is that it doesn't have the fiber removed from it, like white bread or any sort of white flour. It's been processed, and that fiber has been processed out. And when the fiber has been processed out, the process that your body would go through to digest that has already happened. So that's why the spike in energy and the crash, because it takes very little time for our body to process this food, to digest this food, and therefore the energy is used up very quickly. When it takes longer, when the fiber is still there, it takes longer to digest, and therefore our energy is spread out and it's sustained more. Similar for the bread. White bread, we'll swap it out for a high fiber bread, and then you can see if maybe you make your own bread, so you can look at the fiber content of the flour that you're putting in, or you can look at the package of bread to see what the fiber content is. So the higher the fiber content, the better. 7 grams is chef's kiss. For a wrap, and I do this quite a bit, is swapping out the wrap for lettuce instead. You could also use nori wrap, which is like a seaweed, or any sort of hardy leaf like cabbage or collards, any sort of hardy leaf like that. Even Swiss chard could work for that too. I use lettuce quite a bit, and the way romaine lettuce is, it kind of is shaped like a boat, so it holds some stuff in there, and it's gonna add the vitamins with that green, as well as it'll be a low calorie, avoiding that spike and that crash that we saw. Over onto the right hand side, we'll go through some more swaps real quick. So instead of white potatoes, go for sweet potatoes, beets, or squash. And I'm not saying white potatoes are bad, especially if you've grown them yourself. They're phenomenal. This would be a really good one to do like a 50-50 instead. So a few white potatoes and then add in your sweet potatoes, your beets, and your squash instead. And the reason for that is back to that digestion piece. So the sweet potatoes, beets, and squash are lower glycemic, which means that they don't spike the blood sugar as high. And then they can, it won't, when we don't spike the blood sugar as high, then we don't have as big of a crash. So combining these together, you can swap it out, absolutely. But if you feel like you'll miss the white potatoes, just have a one or two little baby potatoes and then a couple pieces of the sweet potatoes, beets, or squash in there instead. And instead of the cereal, because even the quote unquote healthy cereal that you see on the shelf still has lots of sugar in it, and sugar is going to spike that blood sugar again and then crash us again. And that's when we start to get those feelings of hangriness, and we are avoiding that as well. Sugar, which we'll get down here a little bit more in that as well, but sugar is, processed sugar is an addictive substance, and that there have been studies to show that it's more addictive than some hard drugs. So it does alter the brain chemistry. So instead of cereal, we can go for steel cut oats or chia pudding, protein power bowls. And when we go for steel cut oats, it's important to put a source of protein in there as well, and then a little bit of fat. So if you're having overnight oats, for example, you can put in a little bit of nut butter and then some Greek yogurt, and that'll add in your protein and your fat in there, and that will create that complete meal that will help to sustain your energy. And steel cut oats are similar to what we talked about earlier. They're more fibrous. They don't have the fiber taken off of them. As a swap out for ice cream, you can go for berries dipped in chocolate. I love to do frozen berries. So I'll take frozen raspberries or frozen strawberries or even frozen blueberries and dip them in some chocolate, put it in the fridge so it hardens up, and it's so delicious. And then for sugar, as we talked about, sugar is a blood spiker, obviously, because it's blood sugar, it's sugar, but because it's been processed so much already, it doesn't take any time for the body to process it itself, because it's already highly processed, and then it causes an addictive reaction in the body. And this was actually my nemesis when I was metabolically inflexible. It was the sugar that was really doing that for me. I had such a sweet tooth, and it would create real cravings and it was pretty hardcore. I would go through quite a lot of sugar, maybe not on a daily basis, but definitely on a weekly basis. And that was creating quite the instability in my blood sugar. So some other forms of sweetener that aren't the processed sugar are stevia or monk fruit sweetener or allulose. And these ones aren't going to have the same impact on your blood sugar, and therefore you won't have the spikes and crash, and it also won't change up that brain chemistry to make it that addictive substance for you. And then as a swap out for French fries, you can put various veggies in the air fryer. Green beans, turnips, carrots, these can be long shapes. And then you can put them in the air fryer as a swap out. And then the last swap out we have here is to use veggies, like peppers or cucumbers, as crackers and top them with your favorite things. I've done this with cucumbers, actually, because they are similar to the shape of a cracker, and then put a little bit of cheese on top. It's simple, and it's really very good. So I just wanted to add in this quick portion planning slide in here, because sometimes, a common question I get is, how much am I supposed to eat of everything? And weighing your food is the most precise way to get your exact measurements, but it can be a little inconvenient to carry around a scale with you, or some people just really aren't into weighing their food, and that is completely okay. We have our hand with us all the time, and we can use this hand method here to let us know how much we need. And because our hand is proportionate to our body, it really is a great way to know what your portion is, because a larger person has a larger hand and the larger person needs a bigger serving of things. So it really does work out quite nicely. So for protein, we go for the width and thickness of your palm, which is about the serving size for meat, fish, or poultry. And for oddly shaped things, like oddly shaped proteins like eggs, for example, we would think about like how many you could fit in your palm, and that would be your serving of protein. And like I said, this works really good because if you're a larger size person, you need a bigger size serving of food. And so your hand is a good way to determine that. For carbohydrates, and this is for the starchier carbohydrates or the complex carbohydrates, not the veggies, a cupped handful is really good for this. So that would be for like potatoes or even fruit, because fruit's higher in a natural sugar. For the root vegetables, really all root vegetables, or for like the brown rice or the quinoa, a cupped handful or your fist there is a good determinant of how much for those carbohydrates. And then for fats, we want our fats in the most natural form possible, meaning nuts, seeds, or oils made from nuts and seeds, rather than fats that we might find in seed oils and things like that. So when we talk about oils, we want either olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. Those are the fats that our body's going to know how to process better. The seed oils like sunflower oil or vegetable oil, things like that, are so heavily processed and lots of additives are put into them that our body really doesn't know what to do with them. And what ends up happening is that our membrane around our cells hardens, and when that happens, the nutrients from the foods that we're eating, that we want to get all these nutrients from our veggies, it's not actually able to penetrate the cell very well because that membrane has hardened from these seed oils. And although we're eating all the things we are wanting to be eating to nourish us, the nutrients aren't able to get in as much as we would want them to. So when we're talking about fat, we're talking about nuts, seeds, butter, cheeses, and oils that are avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, or there's oils made from like hemp seed oil or flaxseed oil, things like that. And for veggies, for those watery, fiber-rich veggies, so all of the things that grow above the ground, basically, including carrots. Carrots are a root vegetable, but I never really know whether to put them in the starchier category or not, because they're not super starchy. But anyway, for those watery, fiber-rich veggies, which we all know what those are, all those ones that are so many colors of the rainbow, and they grow above ground. They typically grow around the summertime. Those ones, I say, eat as much as you want. The hand method says to go for two cupped handfuls, but honestly, if they're not going to make a huge impact on your blood sugar, but they are going to make a huge impact on your overall health in a good way. And so I say eat as many of those veggies as you like. So there's a few things to note here as we're eating in this way. So food quantity still counts, which is why I showed you that hand method there, even if you're eating all the right things, because essentially if we're eating more energy than our body needs, then we are going to store that energy, and that energy is stored as fat, which most of us don't want necessarily. And so food quantity still matters. Your body will always use carbohydrates and fats first before using the stores, because it's the easiest for your body to access. It takes more processes and more energy for our body to use the fat that is stored. And so it will always use what we're eating first. And that way, when we become metabolically flexible and we can spread out the time between our meals, then our body can take the time it needs to use our stored fat for energy instead. To tap into these stores, we need to create a demand on the body. So that is where the breaks between meals come in, and then using our energy for exercise and for movement. Be sure to provide your body with the nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and enzyme it needs to support in this process. And this really comes down to real whole foods as often as possible in a variety of colors. So if you think of things that grow, that swim, that run, that fly, and as close to their natural state as possible. And because I never want to just bombard you with information, because we take information and we know it and then what? I always want to provide you with some ideas for action steps, because we can consume all sorts of information, but unless we actually take a step forward with that information, there really is no point in knowing it. So from that list that we looked at for the swaps, choose 1 to 3 swaps from that list. And I put a variable in there. I put 1 to 3 because I want you to check in with yourself and know yourself. If you believe that you can swap out 3 things, if there was 3 things that stood out to you and you're like, yeah, I'm going to swap those 3, then, and you can do that sustainably, that's awesome. If you know yourself well, and you know that the more you put on your plate, the less likely that you are to do any of those things, go for 1. Choose the one that stood out to you the most, make that swap, and then we can always build from there, right? We can always take the foundation, start where we realistically know where we're going to start to make it sustainable, and then build on as we go. And as we make these changes, we're retraining the brain, we're building new neural pathways so that these next steps that we're going to take become easier. They become simpler because our brain is being retrained along the way. And then action step number 2 is to plan your meals the week ahead. If planning all your meals, like I said, feels like too much right off the bat, then start with 1. Maybe it's the first meal of the day that needs a tweak. Maybe it's your last meal of the day that needs a tweak. Whatever one you want to start with, go for that. And ensure that there's at least 25 grams of protein in each of those meals, and that your meal is 1/3 to 1/2 full of veggies, and that's veggies of all sorts of colors. So optimally, we want to go for half a plate of veggies, but if that just seems like way too much to start with, go for 1/3, and go for the veggies that you like, that you know you're going to eat. Or that you don't not like, and if that makes sense. I never want to force anybody to eat something that they really, really don't like, but if it's just one of those things that you're like, oh, it's okay, or it's like, I don't like it, but I don't not like it. So still include those, because that'll also be a way to retrain your palate and retrain your brain that you will potentially, eventually, even like them. So don't force yourself to eat anything you really, really don't like, but if you just sort of like it and you're like neutral about it, eat it anyway. So I hope that was helpful, and even just making that one switch to adding more vegetables into every single meal will make a huge impact on your well-being overall. Like, it makes a huge impact on all of your body systems, your hormone balance, your liver detox, your feeling of energy. It makes a huge impact. And so if you can implement that one thing, you're off to an awesome start.